Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. My guest today is Scott Stevenson. He is the co-founder and CEO of Spellbook, and he's also a metaphysical idealist. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Stuart. Great to be here.
Yep. And you're tuning in from Newfoundland, and I was grilling you all about Newfoundland before we started, and then we was like, okay, well, let's get this on the air because it's really interesting. Were you born there, or did you end up there?
Yeah, I was born here in the capital city, St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador.
That's really cool. And what's your favorite part about living there?
Um, yeah, I love the access to nature and solitude. The sort of raw, natural beauty of this place is awesome. Yeah, it's snowing a lot right now, and I love like biking on the snow and stuff like that. It's amazing in the summer. Extremely rugged, but yeah, as like a sort of founder and CEO, I have found that walking in nature like every single day has been like this constant fire hose of ideas into what we're doing that feels like it helps us outmaneuver competition and think in original ways and do new things that haven't been done yet. So yeah, I love it.
So there's a lot of questions we can go in. The first is that it reminds me of like Henry David Thoreau and him going out into the woods and saying like, enough of all this nonsense. I'm just going to go out off into the woods and be self-sufficient and transcend consciousness and such. So yes, like 100% that exists. And it makes me think a lot about how companies can be remote now, and we've only had that for a few years, like 5-10 years basically, where we could really do it. And I was just part of a remote company for a year, and they were going through hypergrowth also in AI, and it was a fascinating experience to do that remotely. But once Starlink is everywhere, then there'll be even less. So I could go up into Patagonia. We could get the self-driving bus to take us up to the Patagonia and take our little mobile Starlinks out into the woods and go backpacking and be able to work out there. And I know probably a lot of people are like, that sounds miserable. But for me personally, like as long as the intention is there, I also like disconnecting totally as well. But as long as the intention there is like there's a beauty to it. So there's that. But then also I would like to ask, is Newfoundland the place where the Vikings landed in the 1400s or the 1300s? Do you know that?
I think so. I should know that history better. I
Because it
think
might be
so.
Nova Scotia.
There's definite no. I mean, there's definitely Viking, Viking relics of Viking settlements there, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so they did, yeah.
Yeah.
That makes the
Yeah.
most sense because
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like right next to Greenland. Um, that's so interesting. Okay, so there might be more questions about that later on, but let's go into
Yeah.
the remote
Sure.
work AI. Well, let's talk about your company. What does your company do?
Yeah, we're Spellbook. We're the first company to sort of bring large language models and sort of generative AI to lawyers in the world. This is before ChatGPT, and we primarily focus on document review and drafting for lawyers, so dealing with unstructured text, helping lawyers review it really efficiently, particularly with a focus on like contracts and commercial legal documents and things like that, but other types of documents too. And yeah, we have around 2,000 law firms on board around the world right now. We grew around 10x last year and are continuing to grow very quickly this year. So it's
So you
been
were,
a pretty wild wave to
yeah,
ride.
and you were doing generative AI before the current hype started, basically. And it's the one use case
Yeah.
where it's clear as well, basically.
Very clear. Yeah. Yeah. There's like a ton of problems in law. Like everyone was trying to use templates for forever. So back in the 70s, people started using computer-based templating, like mail merge type stuff on contracts. And for decades, law firms had been trying to implement it, but it never really worked because lawyers, everything they do is bespoke. And at the end of the day, a contract or document is unstructured text. And
Oh,
none of these tools ever helped. But finally having the capability to understand and manipulate unstructured text directly just unlocks like so many use cases for lawyers that just previously there was really no good way to help them with. And yeah, they're just seeing like lawyers adopt it very quickly. And yeah, there's a lot of hype out there. A lot of people are like, oh, is this AI thing real? And yeah, certainly there's a lot of thin wrappers that don't do a lot for customers, but I can definitely tell you from like the usage analytics for lawyers. I've been working in tech and building software for a long time, and uh, I've never seen usage and adoption like this in any product I've ever worked on. Yeah, like lawyers really, really like it, and really helps them a lot. And what ultimately motivates us and why we started the company is because we want legal services to be more accessible for end clients.
Interesting.
That's ultimately what we're trying to drive. Yeah.
And so we've got unstructured data and we've got structured data, and my audience probably knows it, but if nobody doesn't know what the difference between is, basically structured data is, well, actually I should ask you what's the difference between structured and unstructured data, but I'll give a little attempt. Unstructured means that it's just in human natural language. Natural language processing was really difficult. Now it seems to have been solved like completely. It's so psychedelically as well, which I'm sure we can get into because we connected first because of the Kapil Gupta episodes, which are quite psychedelic in nature as well. So that's unstructured data. What is structured data, and what is the main difference? Because there's still a problem doing unstructured data. Like, I know that there's some issue with getting unstructured data into LLMs. What are the difference, and like what parts of unstructured data haven't been solved yet?
Good question. So I mean, the difference is, a lot of software and SaaS companies that have been born over the last couple of decades, were really database companies. Everything, like Facebook's just a database, Twitter's a
Yes.
database, Notion's a database, your calendar's a database. Almost everything, every web app that you use is just a database. And databases are mainly focused on structured data. You have a tweet and there's a field where your tweet goes, and then maybe you have some images in there. And it's structured in terms of there's a tweet, and then there's the image, and then there's the author, and then there's your number of likes. There's this sort of format to that data. If you're using a CRM like Salesforce or something like that, HubSpot, these sorts of tools, it's a database software where you keep your customer name, the emails you've had with the customer, on what stage of the pipeline the customer is in, and things like that. So another kind of structured data problem, and software's been solving these, and not just since the cloud and SaaS revolution, but even before then. That's really what a lot of software has been. When we talk about unstructured data, I'm generally talking about unstructured text, which is like human language that hasn't been, if you think about, say, a legal contract, hasn't been structured into, oh, the interest rate is X, the name of the party is Scott, and the name of the other party is Stuart. It's just a big block of text that doesn't have formal symbols that help the computer really interpret what's going on. And it's really hard to do that with contracts because they're all so unique. There's so much data and nuance into any clause you could write, that you can't really capture the world of contracts in like a easy digestible structure. So the difference, we want to be able to, at Spellbook, understand a contract the same way a human would, understand the risks the same way a human would, and so on. And I would say LLMs today are, very helpful for this. They deal with that problem pretty well. The challenge is usually bringing external context. So, okay, what are the actual laws of the jurisdiction you're in? Or what does this company actually care about, or what does this person actually care about? Pulling in all that external context is usually the biggest challenge.
Interesting.
And in terms of the unstructured text that it doesn't work well on, I'm not sure what kind of that your quote would refer to, but I think like, the challenge often is context windows. Like these large language models, ChatGPT, they all have this, only so much text they can like effectively digest, and then they start to forget things. And now even with GPT-4 and Claude 3 and Gemini 1.5, you have actually much bigger context windows now. You can feed you can feed in like tons of words, but still the models can forget things and forget what it read earlier and come up with sort of incohesive results. So kind of some of the challenges now in the stack are, if I have 100-page contracts, how do you get a large language model to actually kind of understand that whole thing. And so
Interesting.
we have to do things like find the important parts and compress the representation
Yep.
down to
Yep.
something smaller that an LLM has an easier time wrapping its head around. But it's not that much different from working with humans. You know, a human can't really read a 100-page contract and keep that all in their head either. So
And
it's really not that.
let
Yeah,
alone the county's laws and such.
yeah, exactly. So yeah.
So how is the world going to change, legally speaking, in response to AI? Like, what's your take on that? Like, where are we headed legally? In like, because maybe I'll set this up a little bit larger. Our whole history ever since agriculture has been about codifying things and like more complexity, large bureaucracies, growing. And I just got done with I'm still not even done yet. I still of a long drawn out process with an insurance company, and like to get some money from one place to another. It's just this giant
Mhm.
cluster,
Yeah.
and so like that thing, it's all because they don't want to get sued, right? And
Mhm.
like and like that's the way that our whole system, at least in the United States, is working, and it kind of works in a lot of other countries, that are like that. So what's the future of that? Like,
Yeah.
is it going to be bureaucracies with AIs versus the consumers with
Yeah.
AIs, and arms race?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know the perfect answer, but you know, we started the company because there was like some research done a while back where around 70% of consumers and small businesses don't feel they can afford a lawyer, or
Mm,
and
yep.
if something legal comes up that they have to deal with, it's like, well, I can't afford to actually deal with that. So the thing that like the direction that we want to push things in, and there's no guarantee of this happening, but we want to push things in the direction where anyone can access sort of the legal system, and you don't need a whole bunch of money to launch a company, or to have a wrong corrected. And right now it's sort of a pay to effectively becomes sort of this pay
Yep.
to play
Yes.
system where unless you have so much money, well, you actually can't interact very well with the legal system or do very much legal. And I think especially like I was an entrepreneur before this, how this started for me. And I have two awesome co-founders too, Daniel and Matt. Daniel was a lawyer. He had the experience of going to
Ooh.
law school, coming out and realizing just how much drudgery he had to do in a day. Matt had like a small educational toy company, and
Yeah.
came about all the legal expenses through that. I actually had this musical instrument company. It was called
Huh.
Mune. The website's still online. It was munemusic.com. And yeah, it was just sort of this weird, naive thing I started right out of college. And we were going to build a new type of electronic instrument. And we didn't have much money. I had no money. And we had a little tiny bit of angel investment. And before I knew it, I had a legal bill that was like half the angel investment in the company. Again, we never had that much money. I was just like, holy
Yeah.
cow, how am I
Yeah.
supposed to get this started? I was so frustrated by that. And I was like, how is anyone supposed to really start a company or startup or whatever, when it
Yeah.
just takes so much just to protect your IP or to set up a company the proper way, to issue a few shares. Yeah, we really see a world where everyone can access the legal system, and it's a friction that impacts everyone on the planet, and every transaction, every sale that's made, every insurance policy, every house that's bought. This friction is applied in so many places, and I think so many people, if you ask them like what's the bill they felt the most pissed off about, legal, the
Yeah.
first time they got a legal
Yeah.
bill would probably be one of the highest ones up there. But and a lot of people walk away being like, oh, I hate lawyers. But it's actually not lawyers. And I
Yeah.
was frustrated when we started this company. We actually started originally as sort of a template-based company almost 5 years ago, and then we
Hmm.
discovered LLMs.
Wait,
But
was it through GPT-3? Did you discover them through GPT-3?
yeah, we started with GPT-2, experimenting with
Two.
GPT-2.
Okay.
It wasn't
Yep.
quite good enough, and then we launched kind of a V1 with GPT-3
Yep.
in 2022 before ChatGPT. Um,
Sorry, I interrupted you there.
no, it's all good. Uh, yeah, what was I gonna say?
Legal bills, hating lawyers.
Yeah, oh yeah. When I originally started, I was like, oh, these lawyers, I can't believe they sent me this bill. Now, after working with thousands of law firms, I'm like, oh, well, the lawyers have actually a ridiculously hard job. It's
Yes.
so hard. It's so stressful. Your clients are asking for stuff all the time. I need this done tomorrow. You're staring at a 100-page contract, and if you miss one thing, you might completely
Yeah.
fuck over your client.
Yeah.
It's so challenging, and and the tools that have been built to help them, like these templating tools, they just
Yeah.
weren't that helpful.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I guess I've come to like actually really appreciate the value lawyer brings to the table. I think a lot of lawyers want to provide more value to their clients. They just are doing a really hard job that not many people want to do when it comes down to it. Having 10 Word documents on your screen and going through them all in a fine tooth comb, knowing that if you miss one thing, you may be facing
Was it
you
was
know
it always that way? Was this sort of intense stress like always that way in the 70s? Was it the same thing, or did
yeah,
something happen in the past 20 or 30 years?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
On your question about the bureaucracy, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Will we get more AI driven bureaucracy? Uh, I hope, ultimately AI will make everything more accessible, and now companies and no one will really be able to put up a barrier by making a contract that's too hard to understand, because anyone will eventually be able to read a 100-page contract in 2 seconds.
Wait, is that an
So
actual tactic that people make large contracts that are hard to understand in order to win things, basically?
well, I don't know. When was the last time you read like a terms of service for
Yes.
a company that you signed up for?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
interesting. And that's a tactic. That's
yeah. I
really
don't know.
interesting. Yeah,
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 I don't know if it's like an explicit tactic, but
yeah.
it's an
Emergent
incentive
one.
thing.
It's
It's
an
an
emergent
yeah,
one.
emergent.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
It's an
yeah,
emergent behavior from
yeah.
how things work. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's really interesting. We got a lot of things to talk about. The AI is really interesting. Newfoundland's very interesting, but also we can talk about Kapil Gupta as well. How did you first get how did you first get involved with Kapil, or how did you find out about him?
I can't remember exactly. It might have been actually that first episode that I listened to actually. And yeah, before I get into this, like what fascinates me, I love your podcast. I think so many awesome kind of like raw, authentic conversations, which of people speaking about like interesting things that I haven't heard before. And I actually don't think there's that many sources of that kind of knowledge, and that's why I was really excited to chat. But yeah, I heard Kapil, I think, yeah, probably the first time on your show.
Mm,
And I remember the exact time, I remember exactly the moment where I was when I listened to that episode.
mm.
My girlfriend, now wife, I was like sitting in her dad's driveway, in my
Wow.
car listening to this. And she got in the car and she was like, "What the hell are you listening to?"
God.
But I was like, no, this is like mind-bogglingly interesting to my brain.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think like his concept of seriousness and truth, and his whole thing about not the dangers of following prescriptions, or how prescriptions are not very helpful. um I found like very instrumental in my work in the business, and everything that we do. And
Mm.
like the what I love about business, and I'm interested in investing and stuff as well, is actually it's not the business,
Mm.
it's not the money or anything like that. I'm really interested in the pursuit of truth, and
Mm. Yep.
well, like what is true, and what is true that other people don't know, contrary truths. I think finding those is like just one of the most fascinating things you could spend your life doing, basically. And when you start to see it working, you start to actually trust yourself, like the whole Emerson self-reliance thing, like trusting your own mind about what you're seeing in front of your face, and realizing how powerful that is, I think is just super rewarding. And that's something that we apply in our culture, at the company all the time. I think has helped us be really successful. But what's interesting to me about business is that you get to scoreboard about, how good are you at
Mm,
understanding reality versus everyone else, or if you're investing or trading or something like that. It's just one of the few things in life where you can kind of get like a scoreboard at like how good are you at deciphering what is true, and kind of separating from the herd, and
mm,
or getting ahead of the herd, to figure out what's true.
mm.
And the episode with Kapil I found very helpful in that regard of in sort of like uh trying to like trust yourself in uh kind of very seriously pursuing the truth in a very independent minded way, and it really like, propelled me to do that in like a couple of years after. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, trust your own mind and seeing what's true. Truth seeking in general. A lot of people, the social proof stuff. How do you deal with the social proof stuff? Because social proof is true that it happens and that it's there and everything. But then it's also like the way that psychopaths and sociopaths and all those guys gain advantages through having knowing how to do it really well.
Yeah.
Uh, how have you found it helpful in business to understand when it's one or the other, basically? And I've been coming to some
Yeah.
recent um, understandings that that the way that I've been approaching this question in the past has not actually been the most true. It's been like with my own fear and anger in the background, basically propelling me to have certain beliefs and such. But what do you think about this like truth and the ability to manipulate social relationships? And is truth, what is the relationship between truth and social relationships?
That's an amazing question, and like I think about this all the time, because there are these two worlds, if you're trying to like sort of manipulate reality to get to some outcome. There's two worlds you have to navigate. I think there's the social reality, and then there's the hard material reality, or some kind of reality. Or yeah, maybe not material because I'm more of an idealist, but there's some kind of other reality,
Ooh, interesting.
reality to assess. But like yeah, I think that's super. I think that's as an founder like that, playing in those two worlds is the absolute hardest thing.
Mm,
'Cause a lot of people don't realize they're two worlds. A lot of people will be
yes,
like, "Oh, this is the true
the
world," or
same
"That's
world.
the
Yeah,
true
yeah,
world."
yeah.
It's very, I think, incredible if you can build the ability to navigate both those worlds effectively, and to know when to transition between them. But it's like there have been times when I've said this is the hardest part about running a business, and I actually think the way we first connected, I had a tweet about it was called narrative based reasoning, or it was something about narrative based reasoning versus pattern matching.
Mm,
And I was talking about how like in a business, and I have to report to a board of investors and
mhm.
get a team on board with ideas. The thing that's most viral and that gets people hyped is narrative based reasoning,
Yes.
and on our way to like getting to an inflection point and becoming successful, we ran over 100 different experiments. We actually, before the AI thing, we launched over like 100 other landing pages, 100 different
Wow.
features, basically.
Yeah.
And so we learned a lot on the way of like what actually works and what doesn't. And the early thing we used to do is we would always rely on this like narrative-based reasoning, which the whole team would get hyped about. And we'd say things like, lawyers don't care about it being efficient. They care about making money. Therefore, we're going to launch a new feature that's going to help lawyers bring in more clients. Boom! Everyone's so excited. The board loves it. Everyone's like, "Yeah, that makes sense." And you start to realize these like narrative things, just like they are so viral and they move through the company. They motivate everyone, but they didn't work.
Yeah.
They wouldn't actually work in practice because the reality, when you look at the raw reality, the other world, the non-social world, it's actually hyperdimensional. There are so many factors that determine whether some new feature we launch is going to be interesting to a lawyer or used by a lawyer. The one we often didn't account for is like we launched a thing where like a lawyer could set up their own like little Shopify store. If you need legal services, you could come in and like purchase them. Or like, oh, every lawyer kind of loved the idea initially, but the thing we didn't account for is like lawyers are too busy to set anything like that up. If it takes any configuration or setup time at
Mm,
all, they're just not going to do it. And so the narrative the narrative reasoning never often doesn't capture these like
Yes. Yeah.
tons
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
little like features or like little all these different criteria. And so when we started to become more successful was when we put a bigger emphasis on pattern matching. And pattern matching is, intuition first and foremost. I think intuition is way more powerful than most people give it credit for. What your brain is doing is similar to what a neural network is doing. So you're looking at these 1,000 factors, and your brain is like, I think this is important, this is important, this is important. And if you train your brain enough times, you actually get really good at this intuitive pattern matching, which actually is often much more powerful and effective than narrative-based reasoning. But it's very hard to sell based on intuition. You can't just say, "Hey, I had a gut feeling this is the right thing to do," and no one, the board's not going to agree with that.
Yeah.
So something that we started doing was we built this table of like, here are the 30 characteristics of the things that we launched that are successful, and we could start to like, kind of start to like um,
Yeah. Interesting.
systematize that sort of pattern matching a little bit better. And that was the way we kind of bridged the gap a little bit between the raw truth of reality, which is that everything is hyperdimensional, super complex. Generally language-based reasoning can't cut through and figure things out for you. It can generate ideas, but it can't really figure out the total solution. But gave us a mechanism to kind of bring that into the social realm as well. And
And that and that
yeah,
ties right back into AI because
yeah,
that I think the AI is basically very good at linguistic reasoning. It's very good at narrative. Well, it's good at math as well. Um, but math may
sort
almost
of.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So
Yeah,
not I didn't mean, I shouldn't have said math. I should have said computer programming. It's very good at computer
yeah.
programming, and it's gonna get better at
Mhm.
computer programming. And that was like a eventually it's going to get very good at STEM as well. And so, but is it a pattern matcher? Yes, it definitely is a pattern matcher too. What do you think? What like, because something about what you said made me realize the downfall of large language models as well
Mhm.
is that there's something missing there as well,
Mhm.
and it's like it has to do with something that we're talking about. Um,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah, it is. Like it is the way that LLMs, I think, tend to fail, is they are kind of narrative reasoning engines. They reason the way that humans are socially reasoning a lot of the time. And yeah, a lot of the ways they fail are also the same way that humans fail. Like I also think about like investing, and I don't know if you're interested in like trading or investing. I again like it as a way to investigate what's true, and you get a scoreboard on like how effective you are at figuring out what's true and what's not. And a lot of the way that humans, especially like inexperienced retail investors, will make investment decisions is like, oh, this company has a cobalt mine and they just got a contract with Tesla, therefore I'm going to buy their stock, and that's all the info they look
yeah,
at,
yeah.
and
Interesting.
LMs are similar in that way, and wrong. Like that's how you lose a lot of money as like a retail investor, because there's 100 other factors you have to care about to know whether that stock is worth purchasing or if everyone else is also buying that stock, pushing the price up too high. So yeah, I think LMs fail in the same way. But on the other side, you have like chess engines, which are also kind of sort of a form of AI, depending on the
Mm,
architecture.
mm,
And chess engines are not concerned with linguistic reasoning. They're more like us. They're kind of a little bit more
mm.
intuitive to some extent. And uh, you know, I don't know if you play chess or you played against these engines, but some of them are they'll make the wildest moves that you actually can't like narratively explain. It's just looking at a massive spreadsheet of numbers, and it's like the probability of moving this piece here means that, I'm going to win, more likely to win. And there's no narrative reasoning for this that actually makes any sense
Yeah.
to a human brain. It just knows all the numbers.
Okay. Yeah.
And
That's the
yeah,
trippiest
that's
thing. That's the trippiest thing about the LLMs is that
yeah,
even though they're narrative generators, there is no narrative because like the narrative is something that
sure.
a human brain has evolved in order to group together with other human beings and kill the elephant and build the tools and all this different stuff. That feels like the naturalistic explanation for the storytelling. And and LLMs can tell great stories. But well, this would be a good question to ask you. Do you think that they're conscious? Do you think that they're conscious agents?
Uh, yeah, I feel like I have a duty to have a strong opinion on this one, because I believe absolutely not. I believe
Yeah,
absolutely no,
good,
they're
good.
not. Not, yeah.
Yeah. It,
Yeah, yeah.
and what you mentioned a really interesting point about idealism. What is an idealist? And why did it conflict with what you were saying, basically?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I do think a lot about the problem of consciousness, and I
Yeah.
think like AI is going to really bring this to the forefront because a lot of people are thinking about the same question that you just asked, and this question that was for like high grad students 2 a.m. is now actually one of the most important questions in the world. It's like,
Oh,
wait a
amazing.
second, is this thing thinking and feeling and suffering, or is it not? And so I first starting with philosophy of mind, I
Yeah.
think is important to get to like why I like idealism. But we had this big question about like what does it mean to be conscious, what becomes conscious and what's not. When I say conscious, I mean that I take that to mean there's a point of view or there's something it is like to be X. So there's something it is like to be Stuart. There's
Mm.
probably not something it's like to be my washing machine. Uh, and Yeah, so that the problem of consciousness is the one I'm really interested in. But Idealism, the simple form of it is that reality is ultimately rooted in mind and not matter. And like I would
Mm,
say,
mhm, mhm.
I believe every several generations of humans is born into a new dogma or kind of a new religion. You don't interpret that to be the religion or the dogma. You interpret that to be the truth.
Mhm,
If
mhm,
you're a
mhm.
devout Christian, you don't really think of it as a religion. You think of it just as the truth. If you really believe that. And I think kind of what we've been born into is the truth is the world is subjective. It's made of atoms and electrons and matter, and all that stuff is out there outside of us, regardless of whether we're
Mhm.
here. And and then this reductionist idea that the reason we are conscious is that somehow all this stuff combines together in our brain, to give us suddenly a point of view and an experience. And this connects to like the hard problem of consciousness. Well, it's like, well, at what point do all these atoms have a point of view? Do they have a point of view when
Mhm.
they're an electron? Do they have a And the point of view can be, just experiencing the color black, just experiencing the color white. Like at what point does matter experience anything at all? Um, and so that's the materialist or like physicalist, viewpoint, I would say, that we're kind of born into. But it has this huge problem in my mind, which is like, um, well, no one for decades we've been kind of hammering on this hard problem of consciousness of like, oh, we're just assuming that somehow it makes sense that if you combine atoms together in the right way, suddenly a point of view emerges. And no one's ever figured out how or why or where that threshold is. And I fundamentally like I thought about this problem. I think it's like the most important problem that you could ever think about is like why are we here? What the heck's going on? Like it's like in some ways it's the I think thing I've thought about the most. And At some point I was just like, this just doesn't make sense. Like the whole idea of something non-conscious suddenly becoming conscious because you configured it in the right way. And there suddenly being this point of view that exists or qualia, just it doesn't make any sense to me. I was just like, the question is rigged. I don't think it makes any sense. There has to be a different way to fit the puzzle pieces together. And In idealism, you kind of assume that mind is primary, which sounds very wishy-washy, and people will be like, oh, it's just like new age bullshit. But like in my view, that's actually the like empirically correct place to start, because the one thing I know is true is that I'm having an experience. I have no way to touch the world out there beyond my experience. I have no idea if there's an objective world out there, or maybe we're just like in a shared dream together and everyone's in their different shared dreams, but we have no way to actually connect with like an external objective reality or to know that there's an objective reality out there. And I think I'm specifically like a subjective idealist. So there's monistic and objective idealists who believe like there is actually an objective mental world that we're all part of, like the mind of God. whatever. I would say I'm more of a subjective idealist, which means that I think you just have, if you assume there are other beings out there who are having experiences, the primary thing is their experience and that bubble of experience that you're having. And there doesn't necessarily need to be a world of material out there. We might be synchronizing our experiences the same way, Bitcoin does it. Like if you look at Bitcoin, like there's no central Bitcoin, there's no objective Bitcoin database anywhere. There's just a whole bunch of nodes who are synchronizing their experiences to each other. And it's subjective. If you were to cut Bitcoin in half, you would have two separate versions of reality. And there's no need to say that there's like, some objective world. And if you consider reality as like an information system, like large scale information systems that engineers build actually are distributed. Like if you go on Twitter and you're in the UK, or if you go on Twitter and you're in California, you're actually accessing different servers and different data. You're seeing different numbers of likes on the same tweet, because they're actually two slightly different subjective realities, and there is no central reality there.
So why do people say distributed computing is so hard if that's the case? Like, and I specifically mean Urbit and other distributed computing platforms. Why is it such a technical challenge for distributed systems to be built? Do you know? Or to
why is it? Yeah.
To work.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because every participant in the network has to do a lot more, and you can't just kind of centralize, one big beefy server in the middle, and everyone has to participate, in that sort of order and keeping things correct. There's the whole issue of malicious actors and coming into the network and trying to put bad information or bad data in there. So you need security against that, and that's like the Byzantine general problem that sort of Bitcoin solved. There's like a lot of different complexities you have to solve in distributed computing, but but there's also some great benefits of it as well. Yeah.
Because the fundamental question I'm trying to understand is the client versus the server model. Like, what about the client server model became really important that we needed to do that before we got peer-to-peer distributed computing between peers with no intermediary involved? Like, because if it's just tubes, connecting like New York to San Francisco, if it's just those tubes connecting each other, like why can't two personal computers just connect directly with each other? Why do you need that client or server?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I think the early internet was a lot more peer-to-peer in a lot of ways. I think, no one really wanted to maintain the the servers and nodes themselves, and the technical complexity of having to maintain your own server and keep your computer on all, the complexity of having to keep your computer all the time, maintaining it. I think a lot of users just are not interested in that, and potentially not interested in the benefits of that, and more interested in just kind of logging on to the Twitter server directly and not running a piece of it themselves. And it is easier for a lot of user experiences.
Yes, it is. And it's so interesting. I love the connection with Bitcoin consciousness and idealism. I still have to think on that for a bit. Okay. Interesting. So did we not cover anything? We got about 10 minutes left. We could go back to Newfoundland. So where is the airport in Newfoundland? Is it in St. John's? And where can you fly to from there?
Yes, it is in St. John's. It's like 5 minutes from my house, like 5-minute walk actually. It's an international airport. Where can you fly to?
Can you fly direct to New York?
I'm not sure if you can right now. I think I
Interesting.
would typically fly through Toronto, a lot, Toronto or Montreal a lot of the time. Yeah.
Okay, so direct flights to other places. Okay, cool. At some point, I'm going to go
Yeah.
live in Montreal because Montreal feels like I've been trying to find the good cities inside of the Western Hemisphere, and from my understanding and from my research, basically there's like six of them. There's New York, Washington D.C., San Francisco used to be a good one, but now it's kind of a lot of people. Well, I don't think it is. And then Buenos Aires, uh, Montreal. So five,
Yeah.
I think, five cities, five
Yeah.
good cities. Like, and that's it.
Yeah.
And
Montreal's great.
Montreal is really great. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I wanna go live there. Um,
Yeah.
okay. There was one more question about unstructured data and structured data. Yeah, what type of because you gave a great explanation of what structured data was and how there are variables that go into the data, and then the data needs to be structured according to those variables. Um, and then there's unstructured data like legal documents. Are there any other big buckets or categories of unstructured data? Like I got imagine computer vision has a bunch of unstructured data, and that's
Mhm.
the whole thing for computer vision is because the data of vision is so
Mhm.
crazy
Yeah.
that and then what are the other forms of unstructured data outside of legal documents?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean the video and imagery is a great one. I'd say there's another one that's like related to text, like for us, which is like sort of your preference data, which is actually semi-structured, but I think one that's going to be really important. This may be not the direct answer to your question, but a type of data is like when you're using an application, there's all sorts of analytics and your usage of the application. That data could be used to make the application more suited to what you're trying to do. Or if you're writing a contract, we can learn over time how you
Mm.
like to write contracts. So I
Oh.
think that unstructured like usage data is extremely powerful, and I think we're going to see software like ours, a Spellbook, almost become super hyper personalized to how you like to review contracts or how you like to write essays. And that's something that's really lacking with like GPT-4 now is like, everyone knows what it sounds like. If you're like, hey, GPT-4, write me a blog post. Almost everyone can now recognize what that looks like. It usually doesn't look like a real person
Yep,
wrote it.
yep, yep, yep.
So I think like the data around everything you do when you write something or interact with an application will be fed back into these systems to make them more personalized and more tuned
Mm.
towards you. And it used to have to be done through fine tuning, which can be expensive and time consuming. And then you need to have a model for like every user. But the amazing thing with these new
Whoa.
context windows, like with Gemini 1.5 has like this million token context window, is you can actually feed in tons of your usage or like preference data straight into the prompt
Mm.
to get like really custom outputs without having to do this expensive fine tuning. So that's like sort of the one that I'm most excited about is
Mm.
or for a lawyer, they often want to reference all their past things they've done and things like that. So that's for us primarily text data still. So it's not like a totally different type of data, but it's a use case that I'm really excited about. Other than that, yeah, I can't think of any other great examples.
So this is really interesting. Brought up a lot more questions, but I won't have time for all of them. I think I probably have one time for one more. What so Spellbook? Can I actually go and is it? Can I go? Can I use this in order to write employment contracts myself, or do I need a lawyer do I need a lawyer to actually use your service?
Yeah, so today we only sell to lawyers for a
Interesting.
bunch of reasons, like ethical reasons. Like I don't think the
Mm.
AI is there yet. I think you need to actually be pretty sophisticated in your understanding of law to make use of the AI tools today. And like regulatory reasons, like
Interesting.
there's unauthorized practice of law. Like we don't
Yes,
want to be
got
doing
it. Yeah,
unauthorized
yeah,
practice of
yeah.
law.
Interesting. Yep.
So yeah, we only sell to lawyers today. However, we are launching sort of a tool, a very lightweight tool for everyone. It's going to be a website you can just go to and like drop a contract into and get some like very high level feedback on whether you're completely getting screwed or whether it's a
Mm.
normal looking contract. So we will be launching that as well. But
That's very
yeah,
cool. Ooh, we can maybe do another one about how regulation might change in response to, it's way too early right now to figure out how this is going to all play out, but how the legal systems themselves will need to respond to essentially like AI. Everybody's talking about existential threats, but it feels so one-dimensional, all the existential threat conversations, as every conversation online is. It's just like, so like, yeah, it's a problem, but it's not that problem. Like, you're focused on
Yeah.
this made up problem narrative, going back to the
Yeah,
narrative thing. You like,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
well,
totally agree. Yeah,
yeah,
there's these like hyper viral narratives that just capture people's imagination in all the wrong ways,
yeah.
distracting from like the real nuanced problems. And that's yeah, always navigating the world of that narrative virality that leads us in some really wrong places,
Oh
and
man.
what's actually happening. And yeah, there's yeah, I think yeah, the legal system will have to adapt pretty quickly because I mean, everyone's already asking ChatGPT for legal
Yeah,
advice, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's no way to
Yep,
stop that. So yeah,
yep. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
yeah. Thanks for having me. It was great to chat. Let's do it.